Hi, I'm Karen. We're here at Montevilla Sewing Center, and today we're going to talk about the walking foot called the dual feed foot on the Janome 6700. Now, many of you are familiar with the traditional walking foot that comes with many machines, or they can get separately as a separate accessory. This is not what comes with this. What we have with this machine is this one here. I'll show you the differences. The traditional walking foot, this bar goes over the needle clamp bar, and every time the needle goes up, these little teeth go down. Now notice they only go down, they don't pull the fabric along. What they do is effectively reduce the drag of the foot by putting these between the fabric and the foot. And then as the feed dogs pull the fabric along, these move backwards. So that's how this one works. It's effective for as far as it goes. But with the kind of dual feed foot that comes with your Janome 6700, this has this connects to a little motor on the back of the mechanism on the back of the machine, and this actually pulls the fabric along. So I'm going to show you how this works. It's a really wonderful tool. First thing we want to do is we want to take off the ankle, and to do that we're going to use the lockout key right over here. This way, and I like to take the needle out just because we're taking the entire ankle off, and it kind of protects the needle if we just have it out of the way. So take that out of there like that. Put that right over there. Good parking spot for it. Then, no needle in the way, and I can take the ankle off like this and undo that screw like that. Take this and put it out of the way. Then, to put this on, you need to make sure that the presser bar is well engaged there. You almost have to take the screw out, but not quite. And then if you're having trouble getting it on, tip it forward a little bit and it should slide right on. Tighten it like that, and then give it a little extra push. Now, right now, you could start sewing, but the upper feed dogs are not going to work in the dual feed foot until you engage that little hook in the back. And you don't really even need to see it. Just need to feel it, push it like that. There we go. Now it's engaged. And now we can put the needle back in. Let me get my little needle inserter. In a different video, I may have showed you this tool. I really like this. This is actually a separate accessory that I bought. It's a hump jumper needle inserter multi-purpose tool. You can get it either with FOF or the Viking products. So here I go. Put that right in there, and I'm using it as a sort of a handle to put my needle in. And sure, you can use your fingers, but I think this is a lot easier and a lot more secure to make sure that your needle's all the way up to the stopper, and that's very important. You always want to have your needle all the way up to the stopper and not hanging down a few millimeters, because that if it hangs down, it could damage your machine. It needs to be all the way up. Okay, and then of course we can go back to threading the machine. Rethread the needle here. There we go. Just grab that from behind there. There we go. Come on. All right. I've got a hold of it. There we go. All right. So when you're doing this, this is especially good for thick layers, like you're doing your top of your quilt, your batting, and your backing, and you want to keep those together. Now, if you're doing that without a quilting or walking foot, you generally get some push ahead with the foot dragging on there. So that's why a walking foot is really helpful. Now when I've got that extra lift I can use. When I'm stitching through this many layers, I want to make sure, here I'm going to unlock there. I want to make sure that I have a longer stitch length. So in regular stitching is 2.4. So for this many layers, I'm going to bump it up to about 3 or 3.5 stitch length. The reason for that is you have more stitches per inch when you have a shorter stitch length and fewer stitches per inch in a longer stitch length. So the fewer stitches there are, the less pulling of the fabric is going to happen with thick fabrics. And I would do that whether or not I was using the walking foot. But because it's a thick layer, that's why I'm doing this. Now, if I was simply putting plaids or stripes together on a seam, I would probably just leave that right there at 2.4 for the length. Okay, so start with needle down to kind of anchor things, and then I'm going to snip the end of this so we can give it a good test. Make sure all the layers are nice and even there. And you can see nothing's changing here as it's going. It's keeping it nice and even. And it kept those layers nice and even. Now, if there's different materials, different thicknesses of batting you can use. If it, for instance, seems like it's still pushing ahead a little bit, you've got this little knob over here on the side, this little guy right here. You can make it pull a little bit more or a little bit less depending on if it's puckering on the top or puckering on the bottom. So it's got a little bit of, it's like the stitch length sort of in the top feed dogs on the dual feed. So this is a really useful tool to have when you're doing quilting. I like using number 8 here, the serpentine stitch for quilting. I'm going to put that down there, and this is a good way to quilt if you don't want to do free motion quilting, but it gives that kind of quilty, three-dimensional look to your quilts. You can do this along seams or around motifs in your fabric. It's going to give you a locking stitch at the beginning, and if that's too short and narrow, you can always make it more. There we go. That's a little bit long for me. Move that down. On most of these things, you want to be, and then you can do a locking stitch at the end. There we go. On most of these things, you want to try it out on a sample piece of fabric first to see what you want. And then if you decide you want to save that setting, and that's the setting you want for number 8, you can go into favorite stitch here. We want to do favorite stitch M, and we want to save it as favorite stitch. Those settings are now saved as favorite stitch. So I could get back into regular sewing, back into serpentine stitching, and I've saved those settings as favorite stitch. That's what I ended up with here, and that really works out better than this little short stitch for, this works better for your quilted layers. So I did a baby quilt for my little grandson, and I used the matching thread to the fabric, and it worked out fabulously. It worked out really well, this particular stitch. Now, when you're using your walking foot, you can do it with a lot of different decorative stitches, but I find it works best for stitches that go forward and don't have a lot of backward and forward motion. For instance, you would not want to use this on lettering. For one thing, lettering is too dense to be going through thick layers. And for another thing, the back and forth motion, along with the top feed dogs on the dual feed, would cause distortion in the letters. And so you don't really want to use that for this. And like this feather stitch, you wouldn't really want to do that. However, there are several stitches, let's on a page ahead a little bit, where there's things that are just going forward or maybe forward and to the side. Those stitches would work really well for your walking foot. Like maybe this one here. I don't know, you'd have to kind of try it out and experiment with it. Okay, let's get back into mode 1. So that's your walking foot. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit more about some of the things. I'm going to push the lockout key. You can get different feet that go with your walking foot. I like this guy here. This one, put that on there. Come on, there we go. And these little lugs right here, go right into the plastic clips on the foot here, and that's how you change this. And of course, whenever I'm handling like the needle or getting really close to it, I always do the lockout key. I mean, it's a wonderful safety feature. It just keeps you from accidentally sewing through your finger. You don't want to do that. With this one here, the difference between these 2 feet, this one has an open toe. So let's say you were doing a straight stitch and you wanted to go right in the well of that seam. This is perfect for that. So stitch in the ditch quilting, this is the one I would go for on that. Now, I want to show you a different foot that you can get as an accessory. This is a narrow walking foot. Now, this one here, difference between this one and this one is great for garment sewing. I used this foot when I sewed my daughter's wedding dress because there was a lot of slickery layers that wanted to kind of shift around, and this was excellent for keeping those layers together. Now, the difference between this one and this has these walking feet extensions that kind of sit on the side and actually go ahead of the needle, which is really nice, kind of like the lower feed dogs. This one has it only going in the back, but it still feeds those layers really well. So these two have different purposes. This one may be more for garment sewing, and this one may be more for quilting. This one also has where you can take this off and get different feet. You could get a zipper foot, so this is really nice for putting on zippers. If you've ever tried to put on a zipper, you know, there's always the battle of keeping the zipper tape where it should go and not puckering up the fabric underneath. So this will help with that. And it goes on the same way. So this is our walking foot, and you can get other feet that go with it. It's a great way to expand the use of your machine. So have fun with your machine. Keep in mind we've got other videos that you can watch. And if you found this video to be helpful, give us a thumbs up. And if you have questions or comments, you can leave them in the area down below. So have fun sewing. See you next time. Bye.